CRM was supposed to improve customer relationships. Instead, it's shorthand for Customer Rage Machine. Your CRM can't explain why a customer's package took 5 detours? Reboot your inner peace and scream into a pillow. It's okay. On the ServiceNow AI platform, CRM stands for something better. AI agents don't just track issues, they resolve them, transforming the entire customer experience. So breathe in and breathe out. Bad CRM was then. This is ServiceNow.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn, and welcome to How We're the Podcast from Roper Report, as we continue to churn out the wild ordering from previous episodes and continue our Sunderland AFC Top 10 series. Last time out, we assessed the Sunderland fullback talent in the Stadium of Light era, and today we go full Brexit and assess how useful our players from overseas have stacked up during the Stadium of Light era since 1997. Because we're going to be ordering the top 10 Sunderland foreign imports of the Stadium of Light era. And by foreign, we mean not British Isles. So nobody from Scotland, England, Wales, Northern Ireland, or the Republic of Ireland is to be considered. I think because during the Roy Keane season, we could probably have a top 10 of just that, I think, probably, from the Republic of Ireland. So once again, of course, I'm not going to be doing this alone. To help me, I once again have 3 gentlemen who just love to dig their own holes as they justify where they have ranked certain players. First up, we have the man who simply doesn't care because in his own mind, his list is the only one worth listing out and listening to. And he was so eager, he turned up an hour early today. It is, of course, Gavin Henderson. Hello, Gav.
Hello, mate. Yes, I am always right, as we have stated on many occasions on these top 10s. So, no, this one's going to be a fun one, I think. I know some of these names have cropped up on other pods, but it's nice to order them slightly differently by talking about their status as a top foreign signing. It should be good.
Yeah, tough one though, because it's not like with positions. It's not comparing apples with apples, is it?
No, that's it. Yeah, you've got obviously players from all over the park: left backs, goalkeepers, forwards, midfielders. So yeah, we're basically assessing their impact having signed, aren't we? Rather than like who did we love the most? I think the impact upon signing type of thing is quite big when it comes to foreign acquisitions, because we've signed some cracking players down the years from abroad and it's just not worked out. No big money move. Like, you think of somebody like Jeremy and Lenz, just off the top of my head there. We paid, 8 figures to bring him to the club and it just didn't work out, We've had a lot of them type of signings down the years where they probably should have done better than they did and we spent a lot of money on them. So you're looking at, did we spend very little on these players and their impact was massive? Did they come across and just slot in seamlessly? Were they part of successful teams? Did they adjust to life on we side more than maybe their counterparts? Are they still kicking around the Northeast these days after finishing the playing days? I mean, we've got all kinds on this list, haven't we? So yeah, should be fun.
Yeah, and by the way, just touching on what you said there, there's as I was going through and listing some of the foreign imports we've had, I did do a shit list. So it's some we may have to do a worst top 10, but we'll see how we go with that. And next up, we have someone who I think has only just recovered from our previous top 10, where I'm still not quite sure how we made the noise. That followed Bomber's top 5. If you haven't listened to that one, I suggest you put it on now before you listen to this one. Because it is, of course, our very own Jonny Blue, who is dolled up in blue today. It's Johnny Hawley. Hello, Johnny.
Good morning, Chris. Yeah, I'm sporting my new brand spanking Sunderland away top, complete with sponsor the right way up, for anybody who's received a slightly dodgy one.
Are you wearing the shorts and socks as well and we just can't see them?
Well, I am wearing shorts, but I'm not made of money, Gav. I'm not buying the full kit.
You're not a full kit wanker then, no?
Nah, I'm a wanker, but I'm not a full kit wanker.
He ordered it from a market in Benidorm. It's got the Rope Report logo on the sleeve there. nice to see, Johnny.
got to fly the flag wherever you go. You know what I mean?
That's it. Well, just about, we talked about not apples for apples and all that, like this the central defenders one, which you did, Johnny. But you proved with John Mensah that longevity doesn't need to be necessarily a thing to get high on these lists. So because with this one, like I said, it is difficult, different positions. It's hard to compare a keeper with a striker and all that. But do you have a criteria, or is it just gut feeling?
It's definitely partly good feeling. I've tried to take longevity into account a little bit more with this one, I think, because I think when you're comparing...
Late now. Done the central defenders one now.
Well, no, because I think when you do in same position, it's a lot easier to just say, well, you were better than him, even though he played 50 more games for us, because you play the same position, so it's easy to see. Whereas this one, like you say, you're comparing a keeper to a striker, and I'm like, well, were you a better keeper compared to other keepers than he was a striker compared? And then you just, you go completely mad trying to work that out. So I've tried to take a little bit of big moments, a little bit of longevity, and a little bit of pure talent. And I've tried to smash them into a list that makes some sort of sense, but, the listeners can be the judge of whether I've succeeded or failed miserably at that.
Well, it bodes well since you said people have got pure talent on this list, so hopefully...
And I would have had Mensah in if it was my list. If I was the only one picking it, he'd be in here. So I did fight for you, John.
I can't remember that. Did you fight for him? Anyway, we'll get into it. Anyway, I'll come back onto that because also joining us is someone who you may recognise from the Nerd Brigade or the Old Farts meeting, which I can say because I'm also part of the On This Week pod that I hope a few listeners have stuck on when they fancy a last of the summer wine style walk down memory lane, and he makes a comeback to the top tens after missing out on the fullbacks one. We're very pleased to have Andrew Smith with us. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Chris. Yeah, I struggled to listen to that pod without me on. I thought, we're all getting stuck into it, and I thought, I'm missing out here. It's a bit of me, this arguing about former Sunderland players.
So were you talking out loud and kind of shaking your fist at things and shouting, screaming at us, were you?
Yeah, doing all the types of thing that when I'm recording a pod, I'm worried about other people doing to me. So, yeah.
just out of interest then, I doubt you've got them to hand, but it would have been your maybe, let's say, top two or even top one just off the top of your head.
Ooh.
On the spot there.
Yeah, I think it might have been Jonny said Mickey Gray for number one. Was that right? I didn't mind that one. I didn't mind that shout.
Yeah, he was number one overall, to be fair.
Yeah.
I'll take the credit though, Chris. Thanks.
Oh, you're right. Well, it's about time you got a little bit of credit, wasn't it?
Yeah. So who else said that now? Did you say that, Gav? Or
yeah. Obviously, yeah. Me being
obviously,
right all the time, Andrew. Yeah.
Aye. No, I thought it was fair, and it's all a bit of fun and games. Everybody made good arguments and backed up their points pretty well. So
Well, yeah. Well, I'll let other people be the judge of that. But let's just put on record that Bomber didn't have Mickey Gray as number one, and
Did he have Chris Macon 9th or 10th or something?
10th, I think.
Fuck.
Macon would have been high up for me as well, to be fair.
His argument is he only started supporting Sunderland around the time Chris Macon was unbelievable, which I still don't understand.
Well, let's not give too much away in case people haven't listened, but I do suggest you go back and listen to that one in case we give more spoilers for that one. Okay, so let's crack on. As I said, we kind of shamelessly stealing the BBC Match of the Day top 10 format. So anyone not familiar, we pick a subject to rank, which in this case, as I said, top 10 Sunderland AFC foreign imports since the summer of 1997 when we moved into the Stadium of Light. And I said earlier, just in case people are screaming at us, for some of the Irish players when excluding England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland. So first, we had to shorten this list down to 10 to get a top 10 to then order, which was an experience itself. We went backwards and forwards on a few, and there was some wild suggestions not to have one or two brilliant players not on that list, but we might touch on that, I'm not sure. But again, just because we are going back to the beginning of the Stadium of Light again, we do try and make it more effective if the lads experienced seeing those players in action, even though we are maybe pushing it a little bit with Jonny, as we've mentioned, because he likes to remind us of how young he is and thus how old we are, which is always fun. So let's get into the top 10 that we ended up on, because it was a really tough one to knock together with a really long list. So our 10 was in alphabetical order. We've got Claudio Reyna, Julio Arga, Kenwyne Jones, Lorik Sarner, Seb Larsson, Simon Mingler, Steed Mulbranck, Stefan Schwartz, Stefan Sessegnon, and Thomas Sorensen. And just some to miss out. And it was a really long list, and you'd probably be screaming at me for missing some names out. Just some of them. I tried doing it in kind of chronological-ish. Got Eric Roy, Emerson Torm, Carlos Edwards. I can see Jonny smirking there. See, I've been listening to the news roundup, so
you're coming for Gav's pronunciation.
Exactly.
Like,
I'm trying to be all continental now with my pronunciation.
I got on Bomber's case on the last one, to be fair to him, because what did he say again? Brugge instead of Bruges. So I think it's catching on, isn't it?
Where was I? Carlos Edwards, I can't remember what I said. Dwight York, Nara Nosworthy, Jibril Cisse, John Mensah, who I know Jonny pushed hard for, or apparently pushed hard for, though I can't remember it.
It would have been a losing battle.
I'm going to mention El Mohammadi just to piss Gav off. Asamoah Gyan, Bulo Zend, Vito Manone, Marcus Alonso, just to put a smile on Johnny's face, Fabio Barini, Yunus Kabul, Jan Mvela, Wabi Kazri, Lamine Kone, and Jan Kirchhoff. And that's easy for me to say, of course. But, Gav, we did say this was a tough one. Messages bouncing backwards and forwards. I was kind of threatening veto at one point. You were saying I might not do it if we go down that route. So come on then, who was unlucky to miss out on our top 10?
Ooh, you know what it is now you've just read that list out. Vito Manone probably is a little bit unfortunate. And another player from that era, Fabio Barini. It's difficult because if Fabio Barini had just came here on loan and hadn't signed permanently, he'd probably be halfway up our top 10 list, because the impact he had in that period, scoring twice against Newcastle, scoring at Wembley, scoring important goals which kept us up. You could argue majority of that list did nothing near that, but he signed on a permanent and was crap, and you can't get away from that. And it has to fit. We can't just judge him on that one season. We've got to judge him on his entire time with the club. So, yeah, I could make a case for Barini coming in lower down the list, and definitely Vito Manone, because for largely the same reasons. I think in that great escape season, he had a lot to do with the reason we stayed up, and he had a lot to do with that run towards the cup final. And obviously, there's players on this list who were maybe here for a short space of time, still did very well for us, but maybe didn't have as many moments. So they're the two who come straight to mind, and there's probably others, but immediately those two.
Yeah, and we'll see in a moment who was at the kind of towards the bottom of your list who might have made way for them if they did make our top 10. But Jonny, you've already mentioned John Mensah, and you already kind of gushed over him in the Central Defenders one, and if anyone hasn't listened to that, they should go listen to that because it was genius. I just thought I'd get that in there again, Jonny, just to slip it in there.
Yeah, thanks for that.
And but yeah, I mean, you mentioned John Mensah, but who else? Maybe some names Gav hasn't mentioned.
Yeah, I totally agree with Barini, by the way. I think he's really unlucky to miss out. Other names, I think, in terms of impact, the trio from the Big Sam January, Kirchhoff, Kone, Kazri, I think each of those could put a pretty strong case forward for that, that initial 6 months. Kazri was brilliant in that team. Kone and Kabul were rocks at the back. And Kirchhoff, after his debut, just was class personified, really, at the base of that midfield. He looked every inch a player that belonged at Bayern Munich. But obviously the reason he turned up at Sunderland was because he was made out of string cheese. And that slightly tarnished his legacy, perhaps. But yeah, I think that trio definitely deserve a shout, because they were massive parts in why we ended up staying up under Big Sam. As much as we all give Allardyce a lot of credit, and deservedly so, and he obviously sort of found those players, but they were brilliant that half season.
Yeah. And I mean, Andrew, Jonny's just touched on having impact like those three did in that specific season. But you also look at players like even kind of Dwight York and Bolo Zenden, players at the end of their career who came in and kind of had a huge impact, even though you might not not that impact where somebody's played 200 games and scored loads of goals or whatever, but help the club almost to either kick on or maintain the position we'd get into.
Yeah, you're right. Bolo's ending's a great example of that, because he wasn't here for years and years, but when he was here, he was really important, not just on the pitch, but off the pitch. I think you hear it a lot now about players setting standards and showing the younger players the way to go. So yeah, you don't necessarily have to have been here ages to have played a part. I agree with a couple of the names the two lads have said there. Barini was unlucky to miss out. Kirchhoff was really unlucky, in my opinion. And for me, I don't think we've mentioned him, but Jan Mvia is another player who I'll think you could make a case for being in the top 10, personally speaking.
Yeah. Is it interesting, Gav, that actually, because two of the big names, and it might be because these are big names rather than how necessarily they did for us, but we haven't mentioned Asamoah or Djibril Cissé in there.
Yeah, again, players who did very well for us, scored a lot of goals in the Premier League, captured the imagination of the fan base. When we did the Strikers pod, we spoke about both those players, and I was a big fan of both of them, but I think they both had periods in the season, didn't they, where things dropped off a little bit. Probably Cissé more than Jan. I remember Cissé really having a good 3-4 months at the start of the season, maybe, and then really tailing off when Sabreja was in charge, and there was just something not quite right there. Asamoah Gyan was fantastic and played for a decent Sunderland team with a lot of good players. So yeah, you could argue they were unlucky. I think when you look at the list we've got, there's maybe one player on there who I think is a little bit fortunate to be on there, but the rest had sort of longevity or played as part of really good Sunderland teams that did well in the top end of the Premier League, for instance. Yeah, we could have done this list in a week or two's time, and they could have been on there. I think if this had been a top 15, they would have been on there, the two of them, including Barini and probably Manone. So, in the order of which that came in, well, like you say, people will be listening to this and going, "How can you not have him on there?" It's subjective, isn't it? This is just what we came up with.
Yeah. Well, let's get into who you feel maybe was lucky to make the top 10. So let's get into our top 10s because we do have quite a few aligned compared to the fullbacks one, but we still have a few, up for debate. There's one player who is second on one list and eighth on another, so we could have a bit of backwards and forward with that. And remember, the lads don't know where the others have placed them, so they're finding out others' choices for the first time. So we'll start with you, Gav. Could you give us your countdown from 10 up to 6, please?
Yeah, so in number 10, we have Lorik Sana. Number 9, Sebastian Larsson. Number 8, Claudio Reyna. 7 is Kenwyne Jones. And at number 6 is Stefan Sessegnon.
Yeah, so maybe no prizes for guessing who you think was maybe lucky to make the top 10. You've got Lorik Sana, bottom of the pile. Yeah. And he's done well to make the list considering the competition. But I mean, thinking back to that season, he was here, and I think it was 2009, 2010, I think it was. For a handful of games, Gav, Lorik Sana and Cattermole were the central midfield we'd kind of almost always wanted, with bite in that midfield. He looked like a Rolls Royce. And although he kind of never scored, he probably got as many loud cheers for tackles as others did for goals. But you have him in 10th, and I'm guessing from what you said, you think he's maybe lucky to make the top 10.
Yeah, I think, maybe, well, I think if you assess his impact against Fabio Barini's, he probably is lucky to be on there, but still, we're talking about a top 10. He deserves to be mentioned. And I loved him. To be honest, I don't have a lot of bad things to say about Lorik Sana. He was an absolute psychopath. I mean, can you imagine these days with VAR? He would have been knackered, wouldn't he? He would have.
He'd get a red every 2 games, wouldn't he, man?
Yeah, he was. He loved to tackle, but we love seeing players who are like that. We absolutely love a mad bastard who marauds around the pitch kicking people. It's just one of them things, isn't it? I think it did trip him up from time to time. He picked up a lot of yellow cards even for the time. I actually think some of his best games for us came when he dropped in at centre-half. Was it Arsenal or Liverpool where he played centre-half? I think it was Liverpool, wasn't it? Or maybe in both, actually. But I remember him having good games against good sides like Liverpool and Arsenal. And like you say, him and Catamol together just seemed to work. They were just, hard little bastards in the middle of the park. And it was a shame he didn't. I think to be honest, the big black mark against Lorik Sana's name is that he only stayed a year. Because if he'd stayed here for 3, 4, 5 years, we could have been talking about a potential Sunderland legend. And there's no reason why he couldn't have stayed that long. Because if you look at his career after Sunderland, he went to Galatasaray and then he had 4 years with Lazio. And there's, for all intents and purposes, that could have been him playing in the Premier League. And I know he struggled with living in England and wanting to be back abroad. I think being in Turkey allowed him to be closer to home, so that was a big factor in why he moved. But still, though, when you talk about like sort of cult heroes, he would probably come in that category, wouldn't he? Like Sunderland fans loved him. I don't know if you guys remember this, but I remember when we signed him, and it was before like YouTube compilations were a thing, and now every player's got them. Even ones like obscure ones who've never made first team games for Belgium teams will have a YouTube compilation, and you can just search them up and find out what they do. But back in 2009, they weren't so common, and there was a video went round before we signed Sana of him just killing people, running around. It was like we'd signed Kevin Ball, and everyone was just like, "Yes, we'll have a bit of that." So before we'd even seen him kick a ball, people were hyped for him, and he didn't disappoint. We played away at Bolton first game of the season, and I was there, and it was that it was sort of like the Avengers almost. Like Bruce has assembled this team where we just had all these new players around the pitch. Sana, Catamol, Darren Bent, I think, scored the winner. And it was just a great away day. And he was a big part of the good feeling we had at the start of that season. And when you think about it, we finished 10th at the end of that season. And I know we were probably a little bit fortunate given the way the results landed on the final day and all the rest of it. But he was a big part of that. He had a lot to do with how well that team did. And I know we kicked on a bit after that and kind of established ourselves as a Premier League team, but it never actually got better than that in that era. 10th was the highest we finished, and Lorik Sana was a massive, massive part of that. So yeah, like I say, I think there's a couple of players can feel a bit aggrieved that they maybe didn't pip him, but at the same time, I don't really have anything bad to say about Lorik Sana. I thought he was great.
Yeah, and I mean, Andrew, I'm not going to give too much away by saying that you're 9th. I think it doesn't take a genius to say that he'd be down there, even if it's based on games. But you had him 9th. Let's just put it bluntly. 0 goals in, I want to say, 35 appearances, but 11 yellow cards and 1 red card. I mean, does that tell us everything about Lorik Sana that we need to know?
Yeah, pretty good stats then, to be fair. Like, just what we needed.
Well, especially alongside Catamol, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, there'll be a few strikers looking at those figures and being pretty envious. Yeah, he could be a bit of a liability, and I take the point about VAR, I think would seriously impact the type of job he could do for us nowadays. But Gav's right. There wasn't much I could say against him. He was excellent at the job he was brought in to do, just the way he left, and it was completely out of the blue. It all ended a bit of a sad way, because I honestly think otherwise he could have been a cult hero along the lines of somebody like Kevin Ball, somebody who put their body on the line. So yeah, I don't dislike the bloke at all, but didn't do enough to be higher up the list for me.
Yeah, he was low down, and I don't think it'll take a genius to say that he was 10th overall on our lists. But Jonny, I think we need your rundown from 10 up to 6, please.
Yeah, so 10, Claudio Reyna. 9, Seb Larsson. 8, Lorik Sana. 7, Kenwyne Jones. 6, Simon Mignolet.
Yes, so I want to go straight in with Kenwyne Jones, who was 7th on your list, and he was with Gavs as well. I mean, we talked about him on the Strikers pod, and he's such a strange, when you think about it, such a strange kind of memories of Kenwyne Jones, because absolutely unplayable at times. We talked about this on the Strikers pod. But there's always that feeling that he could have been a top striker if he was just consistent. And if he was the brilliant Kenwyne Jones, he might not have even played for Sunderland. He might have played for a Champions League club or something like that. But on the other hand, you could say he wasn't. I always get the feeling he wasn't the same after David James crocked him on that dodgy pitch.
Yep.
International duty. But is that your feelings? There's kind of two different Kenwyne Jones?
Yeah, to a degree. And I think if he hadn't had that injury, he probably would be place or two, maybe even more up the list, I think, because then I think you'd look at his ratio of better games to worse games being a bit more favourable. But he was never quite the same, was he, when he came back? And it was a huge shame that it happened to him, because, like you say, on his day, he was absolutely phenomenal. I think it was John Terry once said that the sort of toughest striker that he'd had to play in the Premier League was Kenwyne Jones. And, you know, he was physically an absolute monster. You know, he was athletic, he was decently quick as well, great in the air, phenomenal, you know, header of a football. Had neck muscles wider than me. You know, he was just a unit. But great feet as well, good finisher. And yeah, you know, if he could have had even 3 or 4 more of those kind of top quality days in a season, he probably would have ended up playing for some pretty good teams across Europe in sort of Champions League, Europa League quality. And had some great moments as well. You know, I think it was Reading at home in about 2008, and he just tortured them. You know, he made you feel things when you watched him. He was one of those players. You know, you were excited because if Kenwyne had a good day, we'd be brilliant to watch. But the reason that he's only 7th and no higher is, like you say, those days just weren't quite as common as we'd have all liked them to be. Which is what probably, you know, caps him at that sort of position in the list.
All right, Johnny, don't get carried away. I don't want to hear about players giving you the fuzzy tingle times, you know. Let's calm it down now. He was all right.
Johnny Blue for a reason.
Well, before we get on to what Kenwyne Jones did for you, Andrew, could we have your bottom 5 from 6 up to 10? Other way around, 10 up to 6, please.
You can, and I'm sorry to say, Johnny, Kenwyne Jones did note for me, because I've got him in at 10. Then 9 was Lorik Sana. 8 was Stefan Sessegnon. 7, Steve Malbranc. And 6, Simon Mignolet.
Yeah, so like I said, you have Kenwyne Jones bottom. And, you know, just looking at his stats, he was, and again, this frustration for a striker of his talent, right, a ratio of about 1 in 4. To me, you just think he's almost better than that. I mean, is that why he's down there for you? Is he just full of frustration almost?
Yeah. Like a lot of players we've had, you could put together one of those YouTube packages and he would look phenomenal because he was capable of some really good things. But then you'd go 2 or 3 weeks where he just didn't look bothered. I think as well, something that annoyed me about Kenwyne Jones was I know this is pretty ironic coming from me, he was such a misery guts. He was always sulking and rocking the boat behind the scenes. And you know, I just think, man, you're a quality footballer. You're living the life of Riley. Just smile a bit and get stuck in and have a bit of fun, will you? He could have been one of the best strikers ever, and just didn't quite make it.
You see, it's really strange that, because I'm almost like thinking that it was the other way around. I'm almost thinking that sometimes he played with, and don't get us wrong, it's great when you see footballers play with a smile on their face, but I almost thought he played with a smile on his face too much. Like almost like at some points you wanted him to get his head down and give a defender a really hard time.
Yeah, well, I suppose though that it wasn't that he was being aggressive and in that way. He just looked, like I say, miserable and not bothered. But yeah, maybe other times he was too casual. And as people have said, you had some great defenders saying he could be a handful. And then there'd be other games where defenders would just walk off the pitch just thinking, I've barely been in a game. So on pure talent and potential, brilliant player, but just something not right. And perhaps, maybe I've got it wrong, and maybe he was. It wasn't that it was just that he couldn't be bothered, perhaps, and he rather than not loving life, he was loving life too much and too happy and too smiley to be getting stuck in and clobbering a few centre-backs.
Yeah. I mean, Gav, you've got him a little bit higher. You've got him the same as Jonny. You've got him in 7th. We're talking about on his day, that Kenwyne Jones. If that Kenwyne Jones played for Sunderland and turned up week in, week out, we're maybe talking about him in the top 3. But where do you lie on, that debate me and Andrew just been having? Did you feel like, on some days you wanted him to be a bit more aggressive, or did you think he was the other way around and should have relaxed a bit?
No, he would go. He would breeze through games, and you would be like, "Oh, because you seen when you seen Cameron at his best, he was playing at the same time in the Premier League as Didier Drogba, and for me, he was when he was good, he was the closest thing to Didier Drogba, and that's a really high compliment to pay to a footballer, because Drogba's probably the most complete centre forward the Premier League's ever seen, I would say. Mm-hmm. He had everything, and Kenwyne Jones had everything. He could dribble, he could shoot from range, he would score your headers, he would torture defenders, he could turn players with his back to goal and run with the ball like we see Mayenda do these days. He was fantastic, but there was too many days where you would play a team like a Burnley, I don't even know if they're in the Premier League there, but like a Stoke or a Wolves or a Burnley, somebody like that, that type of team, where you would expect him to just turn up and completely dominate, and he didn't. But then against your Chelseas and Liverpools and Arsenals and Man United, he turned up, and it was just frustrating. I mean, we're talking about a top 10 list. I've got him 7th. So the reason I speak with such frustration is because he could have been a lot higher. And you think we plucked him from Southampton, he was playing the Championship, and we paid a decent fee for the time, it was 7-8 million quid or whatever we paid for him. But very quickly, after a year or so, teams like Liverpool were being linked to him and Arsenal because he was capable of being that good. And I think if I was him looking back on my career, I would be a little bit disappointed I didn't go on to do more, because he could have. Kenwyne Jones really didn't. It never got better for him than Sunderland did it. And I do think as well, if you do have to factor in that injury that he got when David James clattered him when he was playing for Trinidad against England, and he got absolutely smashed. I think that was a big turning point in his career. I don't think he really ever recovered from that. But I'm trying to focus on the good days that you had with Kenwyne, where he was like, I don't think we've seen a striker since who played that way. Maybe Ross Stewart, but Ross Stewart never done it in the Premier League for us. So yeah, but I'm a massive fan of him still to this day. I mean, I loved watching him, and I think he was a big signing at the time, because when you remember back to that, we got promoted, but our strikers were David Connolly, who was never going to get a chance in the Premier League. I think by that point, Keane thought he was probably finished and was a Championship striker, and that was it. We signed Michael Chopra, who had done well in the Championship but didn't translate. We had Daryl Murphy, Anthony Stokes. These weren't top Premier League strikers. So Kenwyne was, when you think about it now, he was a big signing for the time, because had we not signed him, we probably wouldn't have stayed up. So yeah, just disappointed. And I think in the end he left because he just didn't see eye to eye with Steve Bruce. And Steve Bruce
Steve Bruce never fancied him, really, did he?
No, he didn't fancy any of the Trinidadian players. He didn't like Carlos Edwards either. I don't know whether there was just a bit of a click there. Maybe they didn't warm to him. He never warmed to them. I don't know. But you're right. He never fancied him, and he moved on quickly, didn't he? I mean, once Kenwyne left, we found other strikers, good strikers too. So we also, when he left, we didn't feel his departure too much, because we signed good players to replace him with. But yeah, I mean, I feel like we focused a lot on negatives there, but he is 7th on my list.
Yeah.
And a good player.
It just shows that the amount of frustration there is with him, how good we think he actually was, because, But I was just thinking when you were going through that players who have kicked on after moving to Stoke from Sunderland, the only one I can think of is maybe Rory Delap.
Yeah.
One I can maybe think of.
There was a song for a time that all our shit players, we sell them to Stoke. Because they literally had practically a starting 11 of former Sunderland players, didn't they?
Yeah, Alex Neil should have looked back and realised what was going to happen. But just sticking with you, Gav, actually, because Claudio Reyna, you put him in 8th. You could maybe argue he came in a season too late because he arrived in Peter Reid's last full season when we finished 17th, and then he did his cruciate ligament as well when he was with Sunderland. But it's thinking back. Again, he came in that side that was struggling, but during his time, he still looked a class above. And maybe because of how the team were playing at the time. But I remember when he first came in those early games, he just kind of oozed class when he was on the ball.
Oh, a really quality footballer. I think you're right. If we'd maybe got him a bit earlier, just imagine.
Yeah.
We paid a lot of money for him for the time. £4 million was a big fee for a player. So obviously back in 2001, when you spend £4 million, you're expecting somebody who can perform in the Premier League,
Only half the price of Tour Under a Floor, by the way.
Well, there's another one. Yeah, Rangers got a few quid out of us back then, didn't they?
Yeah.
But yeah, he did brilliantly for us. When you talk about classy footballers, that's what he was. I'm trying to think now, who does he compare to now? Maybe who's about these days who maybe compares? It's tough to think really out there, but I think somebody of that class in his time would have slotted into a modern day Man City or Arsenal midfield. Definitely. Yeah. He was that good.
Never lost the ball.
Oh, he was, yeah. And you think of some of the players he had around him as well at the time.
Yeah.
We just had such a good team. Like when you think back to those times, you think mostly about the players who got us to the Premier League. But we signed a lot of players under Reid in the Premier League, and not all of them worked out for the best. But Reyna certainly did. He scored twice in that game against Leicester, if you remember. He scored against Everton too, I think, which was that his first game? Was either his first, maybe his debut or his first game at the stadium. I can't remember. But you're right. It was sort of initially when you sign a player for that amount of money, you're like, right, what can you do? Reyna hit the ground running. He looked like he'd been there forever. Disappointing that he did his knee when he did. I think that was it after that, wasn't it? I think we got relegated and then he moved on. He went to Man City, didn't he? But yeah, what a footballer. And he still gets mentioned quite a bit these days, doesn't he? Because his son was born in Sunderland and has gone on to have a canny little career for himself. And a lot of people just weirdly track the progress of Gio Reyna because he was born in Sunderland. And I think a lot of people would love us to sign him, even though looks like his career's hit the buffers a little bit. But he's at Dortmund still. He did have a loan at Forest a couple of years ago. That never really worked out. Yeah. But he gets a mention from time to time.
Yeah, it was exactly the same with Nigel Clough during his career. Everyone thought he'd end up at Sunderland, either as a player or as a manager. It never happened. But before I ask you about Claudio Reyna, Andrew, because he wasn't in your bottom 5, could we have your top 5, please?
Yes, yeah, definitely. That's where Claudio Reyna was. He was in at number 5. Number 4, Seb Larsson. Number 3, Stefan Schwartz. Number 2, Thomas Sorensen. And in at number 1, Julio Arca.
Yeah, so Claudio Reyna just squeaked into your top 5. It was his highest position in 5th. 29 appearances and 4 goals. As we said, he was blighted by that injury, but he is the lowest appearance maker on the list out of the 10. You still have him above the likes of Steve Mulbronk, Stefan Sessegnon, which shows how high you rate him.
Yeah, you're right. He didn't play a lot for us, and I think his last game for us was Howard Wilkinson's. It's either his first or his second game. I wonder if he'd hung around a bit longer and not been injured. I wonder if we would have finished that season quite as badly.
Well, we would have gotten 20 points maybe instead of...
Yeah, really making the team in 19th place, starting to panic and look over their shoulders at that one. I think as I look at this list, I think the type of thing I recognise more is consistency in performances. I've got players like Sessegnon and Jones lower down the list. Now, on their good days, they're probably more productive than Reyna. But in the games Reyna played, for me, I just think he hit a good level every single time. A lot of the things he did were the unattractive, the less obvious aspects of playing in midfield, but you sometimes need that. It's not all about skills and scoring from 30 yards. I appreciate that type of job in a team perhaps a little bit more than I do the players who blow hot and cold.
Yeah. I always enjoyed watching Reina play. Like I said, my instinct, I just wish he'd signed a year earlier in that 7th place. Yeah. Maybe they kind of replaced Schwartz a little bit in that midfield when he started getting injured. But anyway, moving on, Jonny, Sebastian Larsson, you've got him in 9th, only Claudio Reina below him. And looking at Larsson's stats, 14 goals in 203 appearances. But, what are your overriding memories of what type of player Seb Larsson was?
He loved to point at stuff and whinge at referees. They're the main two. But nah, seriously, I actually, looking back at the list now, I think I'm maybe being a little bit harsh to Larsson because I actually really liked him when he played for us.
I think you're being a bit harsh to Reina, to be honest. But that's just me.
It's 20 odd games, man. Come on. But no, I think
before your time, so I'll let you off.
Yeah, slightly. I think Larsson was one of those players who he was never going to turn up and put in a 10 out of 10 performance where he scores a hat-trick or lays on 3 goals and looks a world beater, because he just wasn't that type of player. But he was extremely consistent and very reliable in a midfield, which, I think we can all admit that team basically declined season after season from about 2011-12 onwards, and we just got worse and worse. So Larsson was basically having to try and help hold together a midfield that was effectively crumbling round him, which I think, there's a reason that he made so many appearances for Sunderland, and it wasn't because he was crap. A few different managers in that period all rated him. I think he won Player of the Season in 2015, I want to say. Certainly around that time. So, like I say, the team he was in wasn't amazing, but still he was one of the better members of it. And he's got a few moments that I look back on really fondly. That free kick against Blackburn in O'Neill's first game, that was brilliant. His debut goal at Anfield, that sort of sideways scissor kick that he did in that beautiful away kit as well. I loved that. I loved the kits that season. I think he was, like I say, steady, reliable, dependable, and just, I think, overshadowed by some of the more technically gifted players that he played, both alongside and those that played before and after him. But it feels a bit harsh reducing him to effectively a steady Eddie, but he was a bloody good steady Eddie.
Yeah, and apparently Sunderland Supporters Player of the Year 2014-15, because you've clearly got Wikipedia open like me, Jonny.
Hey, I honestly, I remembered that one. Some of them I have had a Wikipedia but I did remember that.
But Andrew, bizarrely, I saw you really intently listening to Jonny there, and you were nodding your head when he was talking about maybe lacking a yard of pace or whatever, or not having maybe some of the attributes of the others. You have Larsson in his highest position in 4th, above the likes of Claudio Reina, Steve Brown, Desson Young, Edmund Jones. And look, in his first season, I thought we'd signed a cracking player, and maybe I was kind of blindsided by that cracking goal against Liverpool on his debut. That scissor kick, volley, overhead kick, whatever it was, scorpion thing. But look, I thought we'd signed a really good player. I thought he was a good age. But would I be harsh, Andrew, in saying that, he potentially got progressively worse year by year while he was with us and almost forgot what type of player he was?
He definitely changed as a player. I don't know if it was a case of him getting worse or just his role changing, because he was a bit of a glamour signing originally. He could score free kicks and all of this, whereas the longer things went on, he turned into an absolute workhorse. The amount of space he covered, the amount of graft he did in a pretty poor team, I think was important. The main reason I was nodding along as Jonny was talking was just when he mentioned that blue kit that he scored against Liverpool in. It was a lovely shirt, that. So, I was just daydreaming of a nice warm day at Anfield, Sunderland looking good, Larsson scoring a brilliant goal. So yeah, he did have
It might
that,
come round again, Andrew.
Yes, yeah. He did have that really spectacular style to him. But as I've said, I think it's the ones who put a proper shift in for a long period. They're the players that stand out for me and I perhaps respect a bit more. One thing I will say about Seb Larsson towards the end, he could be a bit nasty. I seem to remember him pulling off a couple of shocking tackles. Like Jonny says, he could be in the ref's ear, and I didn't like to see that. But then again, I sometimes complain that Sunderland are too naive and are a bit of a pushover. Do you maybe need somebody who's having a pop at the referees? We don't like to see it, but on the other hand, if the opposition are doing it, why shouldn't Larsson have a pop? So yeah, he developed a bit of a different streak to him, and yeah, I definitely remember a couple of pretty poor tackles in the later years from Larsson.
Yeah, I mean, Gav, you've got him down there with Jonny in ninth. You haven't got him as high as Andrew in fourth. I mean, based on what Andrew was saying, Gav, do you almost think that because of the position the club were in during his later, especially his by the back end of the time with the club when we were struggling, he almost sacrificed his game for us because he came as this kind of attacking, skillful wide player and ended up this kind of hard-working central midfielder at times?
I don't know. I think Larsson was probably guilty of delivering too well in his first season, to be honest. Because if you look at after his first season, he didn't score many goals for us. He didn't get that many assists. His first season, he was scoring free kicks. He was scissor kicking, bloody everything you can think of. And I've also got to say as well, we got 6 years out of a free agent, which I think is good value. So if you're talking about good value Sunderland players, Larsson would be up there. But I used to be honest, when I think back to how I felt in the moment, he used to frustrate me a lot because I just think he was, given his ability from set pieces, we didn't get enough out of him. He didn't, like I say, he didn't get too many assists. And I think after that first season, he took practically every free kick we got around the box and never hit the back of the net. And he kind of had this reputation as a free kick specialist, but really, if you look at his statistics through his career, he never really delivered as highly as he should have, which is why I've got him further down the list. But he was a good value signing. Like I say, we didn't pay a note for him, and he left after 6 years, having played 176 league games for us, over 200 in all competitions, which I think is commendable. Not many players have done that. But yeah, he was one where I could have made a case for not putting him in the top 10, if I'm honest. I've got him in ninth. I just associate him with that struggle. Him, Catamol, and O'Shea always get that tarred with the same brush with me as players who we just perennially struggling, and they were the leaders of that group. And whether, it'll always come back around. People say they were great professionals, that they were, in a time maybe when we had people come to the club here for the wrong reasons. They really did care and all the rest of it. But I can't shake the feeling that I just associate Larsson with struggle. However, I think we were wrong to release him. I think we should have given him another year because he went to Hull and played 40-odd games in the Championship and we got relegated. And I think we possibly could have done with him kicking around when you see some of the crap we signed in midfield that season. But yeah,
rather him than Stephen Pienaar.
Well, he wasn't even there in the Championship though. There was even worse players than Stephen Pienaar, wasn't there? When you think back, we had obviously Gibson was signed in the Premier League but played a lot in the Championship. And I won't torture people too much by going through the full repertoire shite that we had in the Championship. But
well, we ended up with Mark Wilson in midfield, didn't we?
There you go. So he would have been an improvement on the vast majority of players that we had that season. Well, actually, Larsson
got his hands at this point.
He played for another 5 years. He had 5 seasons in Sweden. So, he wasn't like he was finished. And people will be saying he's no Finnish. He's Swedish, but
he only wanted to speak about Larsson just to set that up, didn't he?
But no, he's. I think he's a touch fortunate to be in the top 10, if I'm honest. Surprised he seems so high up on Andrew's list. But each to their own, Each to their own.
Well, listen, there's no right or wrong answers. Something, Gav, touched on there about.
I think you find the reason.
Right, all right. It's like that again, is it? The fact that he played on so long afterwards, this is another thing that I really like to see in players. I don't expect them to be saints, but Larsson looked after himself. You know, I remember reading that he did yoga a lot at the Academy of Light, and he did these extra sessions to keep himself fit. And in comparison to some players who you kind of got the impression they turned up 1 minute before they were meant to, and as soon as training was finished, they were out the door speeding away. I like the fact that Larsson was a dedicated pro who looked after himself and tried to give himself the best chance of performing well. Those are the types of things I like to see, and it's maybe a bit boring and it doesn't get the headlines, but that was in my thinking when I put Larsson higher up the list.
Yeah, and interestingly, just to kind of compound what we're talking about in terms of him maybe changing the type of player he was, he scored 14 goals in 203 appearances, which was 1 goal every 15 games, but like I said, the total of 14, 8 of them were in his first year, which I think maybe, as Gav said, maybe kind of given us the impression he was this goal scorer and midfielder, and actually I'm not sure he was.
I liked what Gav said earlier. What was it you said, Gav, mate? Guilty of being too good in his first season.
Yeah.
We've signed a couple of players over the last few weeks. I hope we're saying that about them at the end of at the end of the year.
So sell them on for 60 million and then get another one. Right. Let's move on. Gav, I think we need your countdown from 5 up to your top pick, please.
Yes. In 5th place, I have Stefan Schwarz. Number 4, we have Steed Malbronk. Number 3 is Simon Mignolet. 2 is Thomas Sorensen. And 1 is Julio Arca.
Okay, well, let's go in with Simon Mignolet, because you've got him in his highest position of third, and third best overseas player we've had in the Stadium of Light era. So I suppose you need to kind of tell us why you've got him above the likes of Emil Berg, Stefan Sessegnon, and Stefan Schwarz.
Well, I was talking about good value signings. Simon Mignolet cost us very little, was signed really to just be back up to Craig Gordon, and very quickly had to establish himself in the first team. I think he played 30-odd games in his first season for the club. Then, went on the following season to be our Player of the Year, North East Football Writers Player of the Year, played 40-odd games in that season, and was sold to Liverpool for, 11 million quid, I think. So we did pretty well with Simon Mignolet, but I just think if you kind of transport yourself back into the time, we weren't very good. We were poor. We were a very poor team at that time, and for him to stand out meant that we weren't playing particularly well. If your goalkeeper's your best player, it normally means that you're struggling, right? And I actually think, for all intents and purposes, Mignolet was a big reason why we didn't go down in that 2012-2013 season. And he maybe doesn't get the plaudits he deserves, but I think when you look at the longevity of his career, he went on to, I don't think Liverpool fans particularly warmed to him in the way that Sunderland fans did. But just judging him purely on his time with Sunderland, I think Mignolet was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And we've had other goalkeepers before and since who I think fans probably associate with a little bit more positively. Like Pickford only had 1 season, for instance, but because he was a local lad and he's went on to do what he's done in his career, fans love him. Before him, Sorensen obviously did so well. And we've had some really good goalkeepers. So maybe that's why Mignolet isn't remembered as fondly. But like I say, if you transport yourself back to 2012, 2013, when he was our number 1, he was the best player in the team for me. Like I really did like Simon Mignolet. And I think, like I say, he won Player of the Year 2012, 2013 and was voted by the North East Football Writers as their Player of the Year too. Which at the time, obviously, us Newcastle and I think Borough were in the Prem as well around that time. So, there were some good players kicking about and he was the standout. So I think, if you look at the rest of the list, there were players there who had good moments, but there weren't players there who had, I know you mentioned Larsson got Player of the Season 1 year. I don't think other than Larsson anybody else did, might be wrong. So yeah, that's why I've got him so high. I just really appreciated Mignolet in the time probably more than people do back now.
Jonny, you had him a little bit lower. You had him in 6th. Is this maybe what we were talking about at the beginning? Is it maybe sometimes, is it maybe more difficult to, when a goalkeeper's not, he's not pulling worldies off everyone, Jürgen Macho's against, and he's not kind of keeping us in games. Is it sometimes difficult to remember him and really kind of elevate keepers?
For sure, because I think all keepers around the world have been to the same thing, which it's very difficult to create moments as a goalkeeper. And I think it's generally big moments that stick in people's memory for a lot of players. Obviously, the very best players in the world and the very best players at any club will stand out. But for sort of lesser players, if you like, the best of all time, a lot of the time you're relying on those memorable games or, even somebody like a Daryl Murphy for Sunderland, right? Every Sunderland fan remembers that goal that he scored against, was it Wigan? Andy Reid plays the crossfield pass and Murphy lashes one in from 40 yards. You can't do that as a keeper. You can maybe save a penalty or something, but it's a totally different ball game. So I think, Mignolet just, for me, suffers a little bit from those kind of lack of real standout, memorable moments. But I do agree with a lot of what Gav says, and I think he is unlucky not to be higher up my list because I used to love Mignolet when he was here. I used to, in a weird way, I used to enjoy watching him. I thought he was a brilliant keeper, really, really solid and dependable. Probably suffered a bit when he went to Liverpool because it was the very beginning of the game starting to move a little bit more towards keepers having to be slightly more footballers than just goalkeepers. It's kind of the very, very beginning of that starting to creep in. And I think Mignolet was, nowhere near as good on the ball as he was with his hands to stop the ball. But obviously for us, and he was excellent at it. And I agree, he was a massive part of us not going down earlier than we did. So I really like Mignolet, but just plays, again, just kind of, but it's no slight on him because, like I say, he was brilliant.
He did win save of the season at the end of the 2011-2012 season for a penalty save against Newcastle. So he did have them moments, saved a penalty against the Mags, which again doesn't immediately spring to mind. I don't think you would probably have to look into that a bit, but I don't know. It's maybe one of them players where we probably should remember more fondly than we actually do. He had moments than we realise and made more of an impact than we probably realise.
Yeah, and it's just comparative as well, isn't it? Because you talk about that penalty save against the Mags, but then if we're thinking about moments against the Mags, you're thinking Richardson free kick, you're thinking Defoe volley at Easter, you're thinking Barini, either the brilliant goal he scored at home in 13-14 or the penalty away and he's up on the advertising hoardings. Mignolet doesn't get to go and do a big celebration when he makes that save.
Well, even David Vaughan, I think, is ahead of...
yeah, exactly. Well, there was a few moments in that game, wasn't there? But I do agree. I think, Mignolet is unlucky to be overlooked as much as he is.
Yeah. And, let's move on slightly. Andrew, I want to talk about Steve Malbranck. You've got him in his lowest position of 7th. And I'm not sure I've kind of ever seen a player who's got the close control and be able to keep the ball in situations where he's almost surrounded, or you just think, he's never going to keep the ball there, and he manages to come out with it and keep the ball and then pass it or do something with it. But you've got him just behind fellow midfielders in terms of Seb Larsson and Claudio Reyna. So what did they have over Steve Malbranck?
Just that consistency again. You're dead right, Chris. He was so skillful on the ball. It was brilliant to watch. He could, like you say, get out of a really tight situation and then have a load of pitch in front of him to run into. And that was fantastic to see. But was the end product always good enough? I can think of a few assists he's made, but he didn't score many goals. I don't know if it's a false memory or just something that used to get said about him. He seemed to come off after 70 minutes every week. So he was excellent, really good in some areas, but just not quite enough to be right at the top for me.
Well, I'm gonna come back onto that because I'm gonna get Jonny's take on it. First, Jonny, I need some context, so I need your top 5, please.
Certainly. So 5, Stefan Schwarz. 4, Steed Malbranc. 3, Julio Arca. 2, Stefan Sessegnon. And number 1, Tommy Sorensen.
Yeah. So, Steve Malbranc, you've got him higher. You've got him in 4th. But as Andrew touched on there, 2 goals in 112 appearances. And in terms of the substitutions that Andrew touched on, 112 appearances, he was substituted 69 times.
Nice.
He was substituted in 62% of all the games he started for Sunderland. But you've got him 4th in your list. Let me just see. So there's only Stefan Sessegnon, Thomas Sorensen, and Julio Arca above him. So what made him stand out for you to have him 4th on your list?
That first touch, man. That first touch was so good. Like he could have trapped a bouncy ball chucked from orbit, and he could have trapped it dead with a pair of football boots on. He was just a joy to watch in terms of his technical ability. And yeah, I totally agree. You know, the end product just wasn't there. Same way that comparable players of similar technical ability would be getting you double figures goals and assists and contributing more directly to stuff. So I totally take that point, and I'm happy to admit that I'm basically being biased here because I just love watching him. He was one of the first players that really just made us kind of sit up and take notice and go like, wow, I can't believe the stuff that he can do with the ball at his feet.
Sit up out your high chair or
yeah. Through me dummy, you know, I'd take it out and be like, wow, Steve's brilliant. But yeah, you know, it's obviously the problem with Steed was both the kind of fitness side, you know, too many substitutions, and then obviously the end product. So, you know, I'm willing to admit that 4 may be a touch generous, but I just think the bit between him getting the ball and giving the ball to somebody else or having a shot, that was amazing to watch that. So yeah, and he set up Jabril Cisse's goal in that 2-1 against the Mags that Richardson scored the free kick in. So he's burned into my brain for that alone.
Jonny, are you tingling again, John?
It's a good job the camera cuts off here, lads.
Yeah. getting a bit worried, are you?
I mean, it's funny because on this week, the other week, we were talking about Len Shackleton, you know, catching a coin on his foot and then flicking it up into his top pocket. And the modern day version seems to be dropping a bouncy ball from orbit and catching it and trapping it with a football boot. But Gav, you've got him 4th as well, so you rated him pretty highly, even though, you know, like we said, the end product, 2 goals in over 100 games, substituted 62% of the time, but you've still got him up there.
Yeah, the thing with Steed was, I always remember this, that Steve Bruce said that the time was right for him to move on. Basically wrote him off as finished. He then went on to play hundreds more games, played in the Champions League. I think he might have even made a France squad, but never got an appearance. Could be wrong on that. But Steed was definitely not finished when we let him go. And yeah, there was always that rumour, wasn't he, that he smoked tabs every day. And I still don't think we ever got a definitive answer on that one. Did he smoke 40 Marlboro a day? I think we need to try and find that out. We need to try and get in touch with Steed to ask if he smoked tabs. And that might have been the reason why he could only make it to an hour into a game. But he was, yeah, I always, you know, whenever he's brought up, people always talk about the same things, don't they? Oh, well, he didn't score enough goals. And he didn't. I mean, he scored one very goal, by the way, away at Hull, which I think went in the top corner. There was always that feeling like, why did he not do that more often? But he was such an elegant footballer. And I've still never seen a player do a slide tackle like Steed Malbranc. Do you remember them?
Yeah.
He would slide like 3 seconds early and just read the situation, scoop the ball away, and all in the same movement, get back on his feet and run with the ball. I've never seen another footballer do that. He was just lovely to watch, wasn't he? We've not been blessed with that quality of footballer at Sunderland. Certainly not in my lifetime. We're a very workman-like team, Sunderland. We've always had players who will run all day for you, and maybe they make up for the lack of technical ability with their work rate and their heart and their desire. Steed was a bit of a different. Steed was very different to what we were used to in terms of wide players, and I don't think we've had many since. If I think now, we've had your likes of your Ramads and your Patrick Roberts and players like that who are probably in that category of player who are quite nice on the eye. maybe don't produce so much, maybe in Roberts' case. But I've got him in fourth just because I just all I ever do is smile when I think of Steed. He was such a good player. And for Tottenham Hotspur to let us have him when they did, I think was a big move, wasn't it? We got him out of Tottenham when we weren't. It's not like we were like a particularly attractive football club. He came here and did really, really well, and had previously done very well at them as well. Like I actually think Steed, if you look back in time now, he's got to be up there. If we were doing a top 10 of elegant footballers, he would be near the top of the list. Such a lovely player to watch.
You mentioned there, Gav, about those slide tackles he did. I'd completely forgotten that, but yeah, you're right. That was a brilliant skill he pulled off regularly. And give him his due, he never shirked in terms of defensive duties. I do remember Malbranque doing a lot of the donk's body type of work as well. So he wasn't just a skillful player. He had a good attitude about him. And yeah, I'm pleased you mentioned that, Gav, because that had completely slipped my mind the way he was able to win possession all in one movement and then get us back up the pitch. So maybe I was being a bit harsh on him. Maybe that's why he couldn't last full 90 minutes, because he was doing defending and attacking, and it was wearing him out.
The only time I can remember this quite clearly, the only time I ever disagreed with Steed starting a game was the 5-1 at Newcastle. Bruce got the team so wrong, it was unbelievable. He played every player who was soft got played, and I'm not saying Steed was soft, but in a really physical game, a 5'4" player was never ever going to make it. And there was him, Jordan Henderson, who was a young kid at the time. El Mohammadi started that game. I can
love El Mohammadi, don't you?
That's it, yeah. We got absolutely. They weren't a better team. They didn't have the better technical players than us, but they had more physical players. And so I can always remember that's the only time I ever thought, why is he playing Malbranque today? Why is he playing El Mohammadi? We had the likes of Richardson and Zend on the bench that day, who were probably more suited to that kind of game. Otherwise, I was just absolutely delighted to watch him. And that whole game was a real highlight. I know it's the only one he scored in. Actually, did he not score for us in the cup as well?
He did. Was it against like a lower league team, or was
it not the one over Carlisle way, Barrow? Was it Barrow? I might be wrong. I might be wrong in that.
But I think it says a lot that we're racking our brains to find Steve Malbranque's goal.
What was Barrow, by the way? I've just looked it up.
I think that's the problem.
Yeah. But he could play off either side, couldn't he? And I think actually in a more player like that would stand out more. He played in an era where it was still 4-4-2 or 4-5-1, and you didn't have inverted wingers. You had a right-footed player on the right and a left-footed player on the left. But Steed actually did make that transition. Occasionally he would play either side, wouldn't he? I always just feel like we could have got more out. I can always remember being really annoyed by Bruce letting him go. He was basically he felt he was too old, and he felt like he wasn't worth the money that he was on. He was
31 and smoking 20 Woodbines a day. So
but he went on to play in the Champions League with Lyon. So he was good enough for Lyon in the Champions League. I remember at the time he was playing for Lyon in the Champions League. We were really struggling under, I think, O'Neill. I want to say Martin O'Neill was the manager. And I remember watching them just being like, fuck's sake, man, we let him go for nout. We didn't even get any money for him. Yeah. But still, Steed is fourth on my list, and I would say justifiably so. I think he was brilliant.
Yeah. Well, sticking with skillful players, let's go to Jonny and let's go to Stefan Sessegnon. He is second in your list, only behind Tommy Sorensen. Look, one of the most skillful players I've ever seen play for Sunderland. Simple as that. Had a goal ratio of 1 in 5, but, Jonny, what was he in terms of his position? Because, look, he wasn't a striker. He wasn't really a number 10, which I think what he was bought for originally. He wasn't really a winger. I mean, was this the thing that really stopped him from playing for a really big side at the top level?
Yeah, so easy questions. Nail down Stefan Sessegnon's position.
Yeah.
A handful of Sunderland managers who were all professionals couldn't do that. But I think you bang on with what you've said. That lack of a defined number one role that he had that he could fill is probably what meant that he spent the kind of best years of his career knocking around at Sunderland and then went to West Brom for a few seasons rather than ending up somewhere a little bit more fashionable or higher up the pyramid. But brilliant player, had more skill in his left little toe than most of the players who passed through the Stadium of Light over the past 25 years or so. Had some great moments as well, scored in some great derby wins and just some other real pieces of quality. I think it was Swansea at home, maybe under O'Neill. I remember he scored one where he just sort of, looped it from one kind of side of the box over the keeper into the far corner. Just such a skillful player, like you say. Able to just get you excited and get you up off your seat. One of them type of players where you didn't know what was going to happen when the ball went to him, but you knew something was going to happen and it was going to be worth watching. Bit of a maverick, kind of player it's kind of died out the game a bit, really. You don't see too many Stefan Sessegnons knocking about in the Premier League anymore. It's kind of been coached out of them to a degree. So conversely to Malbranque, where you think actually in a more modern system, he might have flourished a little bit more. I think Sessegnon probably played at about the right time, if you know what I mean. I think if he'd come through sort of 5 years ago, I don't think he'd have become half the player that he ended up being for Sunderland. He might have had a better career and he might have become more of a workhorse, but in terms of just pure natural talent and flair, I think, he was the right player at the right time for Sunderland. And it's a shame that he didn't manage to end up contributing more, because like you say, his goal ratio wasn't out of this world, but he did enough as well, even without scoring an assist, and he was good enough on the ball and he could get us out of tight situations and help us get up the pitch enough that I think, you'd struggle to find a Sunderland fan who's going to have too many bad things to say about Sess.
Well, let's move on to Andrew. Nice opening line there. Nice segue into bringing Andrew in, because this is the biggest difference in any of the players we've got today. You've got him in second, Jonny. Andrew's got him way down in eighth. Only Kenwyne Jones and Lorixana below him. So, I mean, what was it for you, Andrew? Was it maybe that goal ratio we were talking about? Did he flatter to deceive? I mean, what was your feelings on Sessegnon?
Yeah, he is still in my top 10, so I haven't completely written him off.
Our top 10.
What did I just say there? Your top 10?
You said my top 10. We all decided the top 10.
Yes, yeah. Well, semantics, whatever. He is still in Roker Report, however, the podcast's top 10 overseas players.
Yeah, but it's eighth in your list, so come on, Andrew.
Yes, I just, as with the likes of Malbranque and Kenwyne Jones, I felt he could blow hot and cold. When you mention his name, I can think of lots of standout moments, some really good goals he scored for us, some really good skills. I thought he looked pretty good alongside Nicholas Bentner. When we're talking there about...
Most players do, to be fair.
Well, no, but when you're talking about trying to nail down a position, I thought they worked. They worked well. In fact, there you go, Nicholas Bentner. There's another overseas player who didn't trouble the top 10. Yeah, he was an unbelievable player to watch on his day, and he was one of these streets won't forget types, or what was it they were saying recently, Barclaysman, or whatever it was.
Andrew, you are down with the kids, you like.
Oh, don't I know it? Then you could put together a brilliant package for YouTube where he's doing all the flicks and tricks and looking amazing, but it wasn't consistent enough, and that's hard. If you're going to be that good that consistently, you're not playing for Sunderland anyway. So you do have to factor that in. One thing I will just touch on that made me laugh, Gav and Jonny, you've clearly had your Wikipedias open there as you've been talking about some of the lads and some of the stats. The section on Stefan Sessegnon's retirement. It's just a couple of lines. It said on the May 27th, 2024, during an interview with Benin National Television. At 40 years old, the former captain of the Benin national team concluded a distinguished career marked by passion, talent, and dedication. Now, that's not a quote. It doesn't say who's come up with that. I think Stefan Sessegnon's got his mum to write that, because a distinguished career marked by passion, talent, and dedication.
It's like padding out your CV or a personal statement or something.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds like, I'm a team player, a bubbly individual who likes to get the job done.
Yeah, so well under pressure.
Exactly.
I don't think Victor Anichebe would agree. Do you remember he was chasing them for money on social media after he retired?
Oh, yeah, God, aye.
He owes me 10 grand or something.
Well, Anichebe's Wikipedia section just be, can you write something like, Anichebe was class and you had really worked hard?
Say something like, you owe me 10 grand.
Yeah.
But Gav, you were pretty much in the middle. You had him sixth. I mean, it's seemingly, because, like I said, Jonny had him all the way up in second, just behind Thomas Sorensen. You had him, like I said, in sixth. Was it what Andrew touched on? Was it that, that maybe he did have all the flicks and tricks, but almost like Steve Mulbrandt, what happened next?
Yeah, I've kind of got him him and Jones, in my mind, are pretty neck and neck in this list, and for the same reasons, just weren't consistent enough. If they were able to produce what they were capable of on a regular basis, Sessegnon would have played for... I mean, he came from PSG. Mind, that was PSG before they had, Qatari owners and spent the money they did, but still, a very good club. And he came to us from PSG, and I just think if he'd shown more often what he was capable of, his next move wouldn't have been West Brom. It would have been Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, Man United. But I mean, a player who was capable of getting you out your seat, some of the stuff he was able to do was just great, wasn't it? And again, a bit like Steed, probably came around at the wrong time when you think about it. Like that type of player, like to me, he's the closest thing we've had to Ahmad, maybe. That type of player who, like a low centre of gravity, very skillful, can carry the ball, link up play, good on both feet, makes defenders shit scared when he runs at them. He's probably the closest thing we've had to Ahmad, I would say, in the last 20 odd years. But, he was really frustrating too. He would probably play well 1 in 5 games. I mean, he would be top class in that one game, and then the other 4, you wouldn't even know he was on the pitch. But, he did very well for us. And actually, really, we sold him, and it was a stupid decision. Di Canio just didn't like him, did he? And I remember at the time thinking, what are we doing selling him to West Brom? Because West Brom they were really a competitor, and we only sold him for $5.5 million. I think he was probably worth more than what we got from him. I always think about Sessegnon again, a bit like Malbranc. I just smile when I think of him. He was such a good footballer to watch. And I think Andrew made the most salient point there, which was, had he been able to produce on a regular basis what he was capable of, he would not be a Sunderland player. There's a reason he ended up at Sunderland. But a player who had everything, didn't he, really, apart from height. Other than that, he could do literally everything. I remember that goal against Fulham away, where he just battered it into the back of the net. I mean, he was lush to watch. Borough in the Cup, I was at that game when it went extra time. It wasn't a particularly gorgeous goal or anything. It was just a great moment. Somebody who would come up with the goods. Do you remember... Was it Newcastle away when he absolutely, was it the 3-0 when Di Canio was manager? That was his best game, I think, for Sunderland.
But overshadowed, because then in that game we had the David Vaughan goal later on. We had the knee slide. People forget Sess's first goal actually was daisy cutter, wasn't it? But it was a great finish.
But he had an unbelievable game though. He tortured them. In my thinking about it, in terms of all-round performances, there's only him and Liam Bridcut. Weirdly, Liam Bridcut in the following year when Poyet was manager. Liam Bridcut was unbelievable in that game. It might have even been his debut for us.
That would have been just before his move to Real Madrid, wouldn't it?
Aye. I can't think of many better individual performances though. There's a couple of others maybe that come to mind, but Sessegnon again, and that was away at Newcastle at St James's Park. Big game, rose to the occasion. I think 6 is about right though, isn't it? I think if he'd been a more consistent player, he might have brought into our top 3.
Well, you've been an influence on the other 2, I think, putting them somewhere in the middle. But I'm amazed actually you didn't mention after he moved to it was that famous game at the start of that season with Di Canio's last one. It might have been. away to West Brom when Sessegnon got the first goal. But just quickly, can one of you name the person who Sessegnon played up front with for West Brom that day?
Ooh,
Famous player, ex-Arsenal.
Anelka?
He did. Played up front with Nicholas Anelka for West Brom. And and Billy Jones was also in that West Brom team, if you'd like to know that as well.
Didn't stand a chance. Poor Di Canio getting sacked unfairly.
Yeah,
we had no chance against such a brilliant lineup.
Well, absolutely. Well, let's move on because we've got a few more to get through. And Andrew, I want to go to you because you've got Stefan Schwarz in third, only behind Tulio Arca and Tommy Sorensen. Look, in my mind, he's still one of the best players I've seen in red and white in the flesh. Played a huge part in those years. We finished seventh. I remember not many people thought we could replace Alan Johnson after his contract negotiations went a bit wrong in that summer, and everyone was thinking, well, what are we going to do? And he played in that inverted role on the left, absolutely brilliant, linking up with Mickey Gray down there, because everyone thought we were kind of stuffed when Alan Johnson left. But, I mean, for such a pivotal time, I mean, I think he was a huge part in us finishing seventh, and everyone harks back to those days.
Yeah. Well, again, as I look at the players who are higher up the list, invariably they're ones who were involved in that era when we had a prolonged spell doing well in the top flight. He was a quality addition. He just seemed to glide on the pitch. Just looked so at ease with everything. Quality player. I remember when we signed him, this was an international player who played at some top clubs in Europe. And it was one of those moments where you're like, wow, I know who this player is, and not because he's rubbish, which is often the case with Sunderland links. You're actually looking at him and thinking, yeah, I want him to come and play for us. And he delivered. He was brilliant. And a bit like Rayner, I think the longer he was here, the more he became a bit part player because of injuries. And we really struggled when he was a quality performer for us.
Yeah. I mean, Gary's debut against Watford, but I just remember him. I couldn't believe we had a player that good, because that summer everyone was worried. Then we got stuffed of Chelsea on the opening day, and he just waltzed into the team and just went, "No, it's all right. I'm here. Don't worry about it. I'll sort it out." And he was just that player who took that team and just gave them some top flight experience. I think the only thing he could have added to his game was goals. But just as I said, I still to this day one of the best players I've seen in red and white. Like Andrew said, I can't remember him losing the ball. He got assists. He didn't half put his foot in. I mean, he was a proper grafter. But just a perfect signing for that time.
Yeah, I think by the time he'd made it to Sunderland, he was well seasoned, wasn't he? I mean, if you do look at it, look at the trophies he won in his career. Had won trophies with Valencia, Fiorentina, Arsenal, Benfica, Malmo. So he was a winner. We brought in a proven winner at a time when we'd just been promoted, and we had a very good team, but we were adding pure quality to the squad. But for me, it was always interesting with Schwarz because he wasn't your typical left-sided. Johnson to me was more of a wide player, where Schwarz wasn't really. But still, he'd had that experience earlier in his career where he played as a wing back, and he'd obviously very comfortable playing out on the left hand side. And you're right to say, Mickey Gray bombing past him, it was just a perfect combination. And we talk a lot about Alan Johnson and Mickey Gray as a combination in the team that got promoted. But Schwarz and Gray were just as important together. And we're doing, again, all these years later, nobody's sitting talking about Schwarz and Gray. They're talking about Johnson and Gray and Summerby and Macon, where really, when you think Schwarz and Gray was the more potent pairing, because it was done in the Premier League and we finished seventh. It was just disappointing, really, ultimately, in the end. I think injuries got the better of him. He was a bit older. I mean, he finished his career with Sunderland. He spent 4 years with us and probably didn't play as much as we'd have liked him to. But a classy footballer. Like, and you look at his rap sheet, like I said before, he played for some big clubs, Benfica, Arsenal, Fiorentina, Valencia, played 69 times for his country. He was a proper footballer, Stefan Schwarz. And somebody I think younger fans, maybe a bit like Jonny, unfortunately you didn't get to see him, and kind of wish you did, because you would get to see how good he actually was. He was, top class.
Yeah. Jonny, I've just mentioned whether I put you on the spot or not about Stefan Schwarz. You do have him at 5th, though. So look, I'll not kind of ask you, because obviously you kind of didn't see him in the flesh. But I was just going to say that, can you remember, or have you read since, about the clause he had in his contract?
Yes. Yeah, the space clause.
Yes, we can't mention Stefan Schwarz without mentioning the space clause. Go on, then. This is what you can tell us about Stefan Schwarz.
Yeah, so he had that clause in his contract, didn't he? Because he'd always said that he wanted to go and travel to space. So didn't the club put something in his contract saying if he ever leaves the Earth's atmosphere, then his contract with Sunderland is null and void? Which is just a superb thing that some lawyer somewhere getting paid a lot of money by the club had to draft out that clause about a midfielder leaving the Earth's atmosphere.
Well, he paid up. I think he was kind of on a waiting list, ready to do it.
He actually did an interview with us in 2016 on the website, and I'll read out what he said about it. He said, negotiation between me and the club took some weeks. We had some agents working for Sunderland, my sister, my agent. It took a couple of weeks. Then eventually we went to the office in Sunderland and chatted. 2 of the agents working for Sunderland had commercial space shuttle flights. We were watching Moonraker at the time, and the agent said, look, Stefan, if you sign today, you get one of our space shuttle tickets. The board heard about this, and to be honest, they were not too pleased and put the clause in the contract. So yeah, it's true. It felt like it was just a rumour for years, but then we eventually did ask him that question. So yeah, it probably one of the strangest clauses ever put in a contract, though.
Yeah. Well, I'll not quiz you anymore on Stefan Schwarz, Jonny. We'll leave it there. But we'll stay with you, Jonny, because Thomas Sorensen, he got the top spot for you. And look, and it just shows, isn't it? Because look, we've been talking about positions and all that, and how difficult it is. Strikers and attacking players, they get all applauded. So we've been talking about how skillful Steve Malbronk was, how skillful Stefan Sess was. All these players, these kind of, Rolls Royces in midfield and all this. But you've got a goalkeeper, which actually shows how good he was, that a goalkeeper gets your top spot.
And not just a goalkeeper, but a goalkeeper that I didn't really watch live. That did I? He was pretty early on in my particular Sunderland upbringing.
Well, what's Stefan Schwarz doing 5th then?
But it links back to what I was saying about Mignolet before and why he's a bit lower, which is like, it's so hard for a keeper to stand out that much and have these kind of larger than life moments. But you say Tommy Sorensen to me, I'm thinking of that penalty save against Shearer immediately. And that's like such a timeless moment. Like, I was brought up on, Sorensen was bloody class. Like, Sorensen's unreal. It had it drilled into us from an early age how good he was. He made, 170 plus league appearances, I think, for Sunderland in the end.
197 in total, Jonny.
197 in total.
I've got something else other than Wikipedia open.
I've not got it open. I just checked it yesterday.
All right.
But no, he made a massive amount of appearances. He had some top-notch moments. Part of some really memorable derby wins. Part of, one of the best Sunderland teams of the past, half century or more in terms of league finishes. Just kind of had everything from a position where it's incredibly difficult to make that big of a name for yourself. And so I've almost inflated him a little bit in that sense, kind of given him extra credit for doing it from being a goalkeeper. But I do think it speaks volumes about his impact on Sunderland that somebody like me is going, but he's top of the list though, really. Let's be honest. And even if you haven't got him top, he's gonna be floating around people's top threes, isn't he? I think for the vast majority of Sunderland fans, which just, it's like I say, it speaks volumes of how well he's thought of and how well he did for us in the time that he was here. So he deserves top spot for my money.
Yeah, well, on that note, it's a good job we didn't have Bomber on this episode. But Andrew, and so you've got coming in second behind Julio Arca. And it's interesting, a goalkeeper who didn't really make a lot of kind of worldy saves.
No, but as we've mentioned before about goalkeepers, it's perhaps hard to have those standout moments. And he didn't need to make those saves because of how sensible he was. He was good with his positioning. That classic phrase about the goalkeeper getting his angles right, which I never quite understood as a kid, but I think I kind of know what you're getting at. I just think he was a solid goalkeeper, and he was our number one during that period that I mentioned earlier, where Sunderland were finishing in the top half of the Premier League, which I think goes a long way to why I've put him so high up.
Yeah. And Gav, you've got him second behind. Look, we've got 197 games, and he's got by a little bit of a distance the biggest win percentage. 57% of the games we won out of those 197. And as Andrew said, in goal for the record 105-point season, 2 7th-place finishes. But like I said, when you think of moments, you only think of that penalty save off the top of my head. I can't really think of it, but he just seemed to always be there. If there was a one-on-one, he'd kind of tend to save it. Off crossers, I always remember him being, when goalkeepers started to punch it, he was always coming out and catching the ball he always commanded his box. You always just, Tommy Sorensen was there and you just knew he was there and everything all right because he was in goal. And he was just one of them keepers who, when you were reading out the team sheet, it was Tommy Sorensen number one for years and you were glad of it.
Yeah, first full season with the club, kept broke the clean sheet record even, didn't he? 29 clean sheets. We had an unbelievable season, and it's probably the easiest season of Sorensen's career, really. We just beat everybody by 3 and 4 goals, but still, kept a lot of clean sheets. Is synonymous with that team that won the league with 105 points. Then we go up into the Premier League. He makes that save against the Mags, which, I mean, it's probably going to go down, other than Jimmy Monty's save at Wembley, the most famous Sunderland save ever, isn't it, really? That of Patterson's in the playoff final just gone. But yeah, I met him when I was only a kid. He came to our Player of the Year do for the Bolden branch. And he'd only been a Sunderland player literally, half a season at that point. And I can remember his accent being quite funny because he was already sounding a bit Mackem. There's this thing with the Danes and the Swedes, don't they? They pick up accents very easily. And I can just always remember when, even though I was only little, I can remember, half Danish, half Mackem sounding goalkeeper that had, who'd only been here 2 minutes. And he was just big, and he was an impressive goalkeeper. He filled the goal, didn't he? Similar to Schmeichel in many ways, who was obviously his competition for the national team. And by all accounts, it was Schmeichel who recommended him to Sunderland. And he'd been watched by Man United and various others. So he was obviously really highly rated. But we didn't know nothing about him. And he came in to replace somebody who, I didn't rate Lionel Perez at all, if I'm honest. I know he looked good in a goalkeeper shirt, and he maybe had the ability to do flashy things, Lionel Perez, but I didn't rate him. I didn't particularly like him. So he came in and replaced a goalkeeper and actually a lot of fans were blaming Perez for the fact that we didn't get promoted because of his performance at Wembley. So he came in off the back of that and just gave everybody assurance and confidence. And, big disappointment with Sorensen was that we lost him for £2 million. He was better than that. He was a top-class keeper. To only get $2 million for him was
he played in the Premier League for the best part of 10 years.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. And if you think about it as well, his last season with us, because he had an injury, didn't he, which kept him out for like 4 months or so. And we rotated between like Macho, Poom, Myra, and none of them were as good as Tommy Sorensen. They were all decent goalkeepers in their own right, but they weren't Tommy Sorensen. And that part of his can't help but think, if he'd stayed fit and we'd maybe, had one of our most dependable players that season available all. I'm just looking at it now. He played 21 games that season, which, that's 17 games we didn't have our best goalkeeper for.
So we might have gotten 18 points instead of 15 or something like that.
No, I do think it would have made a huge difference having Sorensen available all the time. I can remember, obviously Macho I was at Anfield that day when Macho had such a good game. But we weren't the same team without him in it. There was a lot of reasons why we went down that season, but still, if we kept him fit, if we'd had a motivated Kevin Phillips and we'd, maybe not gambled so much on on some poor foreign players in the market that season, maybe we would have done better. But yeah, I'm totally going off on the wrong track. Anyways, Tommy Sorensen, outstanding player. I mean, great value, £500,000 signing. We got a lot out of him, and just somebody who, again, I think he's synonymous with one of the best periods in all of our memories of being Sunderland supporters. And that penalty save against Alan Shearer, though, just to go back to it one more time. Again, people, maybe for Jonny, I don't know if he knows much, but Shearer was not missing many penalties at that time. And I remember when Niall Quinn made that tackle, you were like, "Oh fuck, we've blown it." Like it was, wasn't it? You just don't. You never expected Alan Shearer to miss a penalty.
I'll always remember that the camera went to this Newcastle fan who was celebrating when the penalty was awarded. I'll never forget that fan, because it was almost like we've scored.
Didn't the camera pan back to him, if it's the one I'm thinking of?
Yes, it panned back to him after he had his head in his...
Yeah. So, but like, Shearer just didn't miss penalties, and then he did in that game,
The brilliant thing about Tommy Sorensen in that penalty was Shearer always went top left. So he always hooked it into the top left-hand corner with his right foot, and he always went opposite. If you remember his penalty against Switzerland, the opening Euro 96, so that was always the Shearer trademark penalty, and he went in the opposite direction, and Soren kind of, caught his bluff and ended up saving it. But
I always think as well, can you imagine if would he have been viewed differently had Kevin Ball lobbed him from 50 yards?
Well, I think Bally would have looked at him differently.
Yeah, Bally tells a good story about that one when they went back into the changing rooms, and everyone's like, "Fucking hell, Bally, what's that all about?" And Sorensen he does it in the Danish accent. He sounds German when he says it, but he says Sorensen just piped up from the back. "I had it covered."
I think I've heard Alex Ray talking about that. I'm sure where he's watching this ball and he's going, "Bally, that's fucking in that." And everyone shitting themselves on the pitch.
Yeah. But it's synonymous with some great times, and always will be. And I think somebody, look, he was a good pro, wasn't he? I know when he was at Villa, he fell out with, I can't remember who it was with, who was the manager. It might have been David O'Leary, or might have been O'Neill, I'm not sure, but he fell out with one of the managers and ended up getting sold.
O'Neill,
or he left. Was it O'Neill, was it? Yeah, he ended up leaving. But not somebody you ever think of as like a big disruptive character. He was he was very professional, Sorensen, wasn't he? So yeah, loved him, and that's why he's second on my list.
Yeah. And the last one to discuss is Julio Arga. Before we get into Andrew and Gav's top spot, Jonny, he gets third on your list. And look, we're splitting hairs at the top. And look, and there's some unbelievable things when you get into Julio Arga, apart from the fact he was an absolutely brilliant player. But, the fact that he came in when we were riding high almost, but then kind of stuck with it and stuck it out, because, we're talking about some players who were part of successful sides. Julio had both of them, but people still look at him and just absolutely love the guy.
Yeah, and like you say, splitting hairs, isn't it? I think, he's third for me, but on another day, if you'd asked us in a slightly different mood, he could have easily been second, or he could have been first, or, there's no shame in coming below, whoever you put second and first, because there's nothing. There's a Rizzler paper between them. But yeah, I think Julio maybe suffers a little bit in my personal memory, because my memories of Arca grow towards the end of his time at Sunderland, and Sunderland got worse towards the end of his time at Sunderland. So yeah, maybe that's why I've put him third instead of second or first. But we talked about one of the fullbacks pod as well, didn't we? He was he was brilliant. Great footballer, really talented, could play in a few different positions as well, which I kind of used to argue against him on the fullbacks list, but probably counts for him in this list. He had a few different strings to his bow, could take a decent set piece as well every now and then. Maybe not quite as good as Larson at the direct free kicks, but certainly up there.
I don't know. He took about a tenth of the amount of Larson.
Yeah, I just want to come back because Gav was slagging off Larson's free kicks a little bit before. He's still fourth. He's still fourth on the Premier League free kick scorers list.
Is he really?
Yeah, he
must have scored 7 of them in his first season for us. Then,
yeah, but he's got 11 free kicks.
I suppose if you take 1,000, then somehow
the Cristiano Ronaldo approach. But no, so I think Julio, he was just all round a brilliant player, great character. And obviously, like, massively took to the Northeast as a region. He ended up at Borough after he left Sunderland, and then the South Shield stuff when he was finished playing. And he still speaks well of the club now, doesn't he, Julio? And he's always getting wailed out by some podcast or paper or whatever for a little quote about Sunderland every now and then. So I think again, just one of them players, a bit like Sorensen. Every Sunderland fan has got good things to say about Julio Walker. Every Sunderland fan is going to have him high up in this list. And I think it's fully deserved. And like I said, just the only thing I'd say that hurts him is just the fact that obviously he ended up being part of one of our worst Premier League teams. Which just, it's not his fault, but obviously it's just, you don't want that on your CV, do you? But that aside, great player, great bloke, and just, loved watching him.
Yeah, and Andrew, you had him in your top spot. And look, I mean, we all mentioned how good a player he was, but I think actually we still love him. I mean, he's a great fella and all that, but you look at he was here for 6 years, and to be fair to him, after that first relegation, he was one of the few that didn't jump ship, and you wouldn't have blamed him.
Oh yeah, he could have very easily gone to somewhere else and stayed in the top flight. He hung around. He was brilliant for us. Right at the top of the pod, somebody mentioned that they're like when a player from somewhere else comes and settles into the region. Julio Walker did that. I don't know if he still lives in Sunderland or Washington, but he's definitely been in the area since retiring.
He moved back to Argentina for like 2 years, and he's back now.
Yeah,
he's back in the Northeast.
So yeah, he obviously appreciated being here as much as we enjoyed watching him. The story I love most about Arca wasn't on the pitch. It was an interview he did where his mum was looking back through a bag of old football kits. I don't know if any of you remember this one.
Yeah.
And apparently Julio Walker had bought a Sunderland shirt as a young kid at some market on holiday or something. So years before he even knew who Sunderland were, he was getting this shirt with Vaux on. I think just because he liked the...
It was the blue one, wasn't it?
Oh, I thought it was the yellow.
Oh, the yellow one. The yellow one.
Yeah, it was yellow, yeah.
But the blue and the yellow were at the same time, and they were very similar. And I think just the badge, it had the ship on and the stripes and the ball, and that appealed to him. And then years later, he's pulling on a Sunderland shirt for real and doing some great things. He was probably the player who had a bit of everything about him on this list. As I've said, I sometimes prefer the more consistent performers over the skillful ones. Zarka did both. He was consistent. You knew what he was going to get from him. And then suddenly he would just produce a moment of magic, like that goal at Bradford, for example. Just phenomenal. Great player. Loved him to bits.
Yeah. And Gav, he's your number one as well. And I touched on it before, but when you think about it, under Mick McCarthy, when we came down after that, the first one, the 90s, I think it was, that the fact that he stuck it out 2 years in the Championship when he was really a Premier League player and he was in his prime.
Oh yeah, I mean he could have left, couldn't he? I think was it the January window of that season after relegation where we just had because he'd had such a brilliant season for us. There were loads of Premier League teams wanted Julio, and he decided to stay, wanted to get out and get the club promoted. And yeah, I mean, we spoke about him on the fullbacks pod, but it was hard to give a rounded view on Arca because he wasn't just a left back. He played games at left midfield. He played games in the middle for us. He would play anywhere you asked him to play, really. I just loved him. My hero as a kid was Niall Quinn, but as I started getting a little bit older, it was Julio, and I used to always get his name on the back of my shirt. And that chant, just Julio, Julio, it still follows him now, doesn't it? That even the chant he has to the Spandau Ballet song, if somebody spots him out in public or in a pub or anywhere, he gets hit with that song. Because people just fell in love with the lad. He had loads of ability, and yes, he was a fantastic character, but there's not really that many examples, is there, of players who've come from abroad and they've just completely fell in love with the area and understand what it means to be a Mackem. Like, he is a Mackem. He might be from Buenos Aires, but he's a Mackem. I mean, he spent more of his life in the Northeast now than he did ever in Argentina, which says a lot about how much he really does love Sunderland. And as I said, there's not many players you can really say that about. He actually played more games, for Borough than he did Sunderland. And I don't think Middlesbrough fans would count Julio as they love him, but I don't think he's regarded in the same way he is by Sunderland supporters. We really took him to our hearts. And I actually think he was unlucky not to play, for his country at senior level, because there were a couple of seasons there where he played for. If you remember when he first signed, didn't he miss like a chunk because he was away with Argentina under 20s at the Olympics? I think we had him for like maybe a month and then he disappeared for a month. I'm sure he was the captain of that team at the Olympics and did very, very well. And maybe, looking at his career, I wonder if he had left Sunderland earlier and got that big move, maybe he would have played for Argentina. And he probably knew that at the time, especially when we were languishing, and we weren't languishing, we were doing pretty well in the Championship. But, the club was in a bit of a shit state when we weren't spending money. We'd sold everyone off of any value. Julio was pretty much the only player we had left who, you could look at and go, he's probably worth a few bob him. He stuck about. He didn't push for a move. He didn't try and get away. And I said this on the fullbacks pod. It's a little bit disappointing that he left when he did, because if he'd hung around in that season when Roy Keane was manager, I would have loved him to have been a part of that and that resurgence. And it's just a little, but to be honest, Julio gave us probably 2 years more than he should have. He should have left when we got relegated. He was good enough to still play in the Premier League. And we saw that because he just stood out like a sore thumb in that McCarthy team. I mean, no disrespect to the players of that team. Your Carl Robinsons, your Jeff Whitley's, Liam Lawrence, Dean Whiteheads, Sean Thorne, Paul Thirlwell, but they just weren't on Julio's level. He was just better than all of them. And I hear, when I hear Kelvin, and I've heard Rob Mason and others on our pod talk about Charlie Hurley, and how basically Charlie Hurley, he played the majority of his career for Sunderland in the second tier, but he was so much better than that. And Sunderland fans idolise the result. In many respects, Julio's my generation's Charlie Hurley, because he was better than that. He was better than the Championship, and he stuck around. And yeah, I don't know. I haven't got a single bad thing to say about Julio Walker. I think he was, you see some of the goals he scored for Sunderland. I mean, that one against Bradford is the one that stands out like a sore thumb. But he was capable of the sublime, and on top of that, he was a grafter and he was hard. He was a proper Sunderland player. Really, really did love Julio. And I just think it's a shame, we've never had him in some sort of coaching capacity in the club, because I think he'd be a real big asset to the team when we're signing all these foreign lads. He would be a massive asset to the club to help ease players in that transition, because nobody knows more than Julio how difficult it is to go from being a teenager from the other side of the world to adapting to life on our side. And he made that transition probably better than anyone ever has. So, I mean, can't say much more about Julio other than he's a complete legend. Loved him.
I think he has done a bit with younger age groups, Gav, at the Academy of Light. And that's a good thing, because he was a very skillful player, but he had those other attributes. I think he would have a lot to give, maybe in a more senior coaching capacity. But he has had a bit of influence, and that's nice to see when he's worked with some of the prospects coming through.
Yeah, but that is some statement to make, Gav, about putting him up there with this generation's Charlie Hurley.
Certainly, when I was a kid, mean, you got 6 years out of Julio, and he was he should have got, when all them players left in 2003, for all intents and purposes, he should have gone somewhere where he should have played in the Premier League, La Liga, Serie A. He was that good, and he didn't. He stayed,
Yep. Well, let's wrap this up before you start talking about the fuzzy tingle times. So we've heard all of the top 10s from the three gentlemen today. So let's take the averages of all three lists. So this is our final 10. In number 10, we have Lorik Sarna. In number 9, Kenwyne Jones. 8 is Claudio Reyna. 7, Seb Larsson. 6, Stefan Sessegnon. 5, Steve Malbranc. 4, Simon Mignolet. And those two, Simon Mignolet and Steve Malbranc, were actually equal. But Simon Mignolet nicked it because he had the highest placing, which was third from Gav. In third, Svan Schwartz. In second, Thomas Sorensen. And in top spot, we have Gav's love of his younger years, or Arca. And for those who are in the slightest bit interested, just so I can stick my neck on the block as well, because to make it slightly fair, my ordering was, I had Lorik Sarna in 10, I had Seb Larsson in 9, I had Simon Mignolet in 8, I had Kenwyne Jones 7, Stefan Sessegnon 6th, Steve Malbranc 5th, Claudio Reyna 4th, Thomas Sorensen 3rd, Julio Arca 2nd, Stefan Schwartz in my top spot. So there you have it. So now we've done everything. Feel free to shout at us for either our 10 shortlist to start with, or where we've placed any of those players in our top 10. Again, everyone's going to be different, I'm sure, but I'm sure everyone will get in touch who disagree as usual. So it just leaves me to say thank you very much, Andrew. Always a pleasure, mate.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And thanks, lads. That was another good conversation, that one.
Yep. Not too much controversy this time, Jonny. So your throat's not sore off making strange noises on this one.
No, I think I'll still have my vocal cords intact after this one, which is a nice change. No bomber is a safe time for me.
Yeah, we saw us 10. That would have made it an interesting pod, but never mind. And Gav, I hope we haven't left you too emotional after talking about who you are.
Yeah, I'm just looking forward to people of a certain generation tell me I'm a complete idiot for comparing him to Charlie Hurley. But there's a thought for people to go away with, when you think about the pantheon of Sunderland legends and who's who, is he up there?
That's it. I suppose that's the final question from today's pod. So thanks again, Gav. And thanks again for everyone for listening. Like we do appreciate the feedback. It's a good laugh when people disagree and stuff. We had some good comments on the fullbacks one, which we all had a bit of a chuckle at. So it's always good when you get in touch. Of course, keep a lookout on the Roker Report website. We've got all the build up to everything going on, haven't we, Gav?
Yes, we have. We've got plenty coming up. We don't know when this one's going to record, Chris, so I'll not give too much away, but we are here every single day. Plenty of podcasts. Sunderland are keeping us busy, aren't they? Every day there just seems to be 4 and 5 mad stories to sort of, comment on, and we're doing our best to get all the expert views on the players we're signing, because we don't know too much about them ourselves. So yeah, plenty to go on, and people seem to be loving it too. Loads of response on social media, which is always good. People seem to be enjoying it. We're keeping people busy and making their commutes and dog walks and skiving from work a lot easier. So yeah, seems to be going well.
Well, that's it. I love it when I'm trying to have a lie-in on a weekend, Gav, and my phone's going nuts because you're sending out the bat signal because someone's sent out a rumour that we might sign someone in the next 4 hours or something.
Hey, we only go off tangible stuff. If Fabrizio Romano or Keith Downey tweet it, we're on it, right? So yeah, that's our promise to the listeners. If Sunderland... if something concrete's reported on Sunderland over this next month or two as the transfer window stays open, we'll be out there with a podcast pretty quickly.
There you go. There's a Gavin Henderson guarantee for the summer. But
before we go, Chris, sorry, I know you're trying to round off, but should we read out Bomber's list?
Go on then.
Yes.
I'll let you do it.
So just to let the listeners in on this, Bomber was meant to be on this show and he couldn't make it. So he sent us through his list, and top of it was Stefan Sessegnon. He had Kenwyne Jones in 4th place. He had Stefan Schwartz bottom. Bomber, there would have been. You said to Jonny just as you were signing off there. It wasn't as controversial as some of the others. It's because Bomber's not here. It would have been going spare if he was on.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's a slight regret we didn't.
Justice for Bomber. Justice for Bomber. He's not here to defend himself. And as somebody who has been at the wrong end of some of the abuse that flies around in these pods.
Yeah, don't make us bring up the manager's pod, Andrew.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Stefan Sessegnon top and Stefan Schwartz bottom is all I need to say. We'll let the listeners decide.
Was that definitely the right way around that list? Come on, let's
you never know with him, as Chris revealed on the one Bomber was on. He sends them in random orders, so you never know.
And with the list in either order, I had to check because I didn't have a clue which order it was actually in. But there you go. I'm sure he'll be on a future pod. He can defend himself or just admit he was wrong. I don't, either one of those will do.
He's been texting us while we've been doing this podcast saying, what was it he actually said? Anyone who doesn't have Sess at number 1 can fuck off.
I'm not defending him anymore there. Leave him to it.
Well, that's all four of us. Maybe Johnny Blue got the closest there with runners up for Sessegnon, but yeah. But like I said, it's all good fun, and we're all got different lists. Some people have got very, very different lists, but he's not here to defend himself, so we'll crack on. But yeah, do let us know. We love to hear everyone's feedback and how much you do disagree with us. So as I said, keep a lookout. Daily releases on How We the Podcast, like Gav says. But from us, bye for now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.